or is respected.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta. You're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start as always with a check of the top headlines this hour. After US President Trump's imposition of fresh tariffs on 8 European countries over Greenland, reports suggest that the European Union is mulling the use of its anti-coercion instrument in response. A draft charter sent to about 60 countries by the US administration calls for members to contribute $1 billion in cash if they want their membership to last more than 3 years. This comes amid reports from various countries like Pakistan, Hungary and Jordan of the receipt of an invitation to join the board as founding members. Scotland's First Minister John Swinney has said that he will call for another independence referendum if his Scottish National Party won a majority in May's Scottish Parliament election, a result that could end Keir Starmer's premiership. At least 5,000 people have been killed in protests in Iran, including about 500 security personnel. An Iranian official in the region has said, citing verified figures and accusing terrorists and armed rioters of killing innocent Iranians. The Pentagon has ordered about 1,500 active duty soldiers to prepare for a possible deployment to Minnesota, the site of large protests against the government's deportation drive. According to reports, the Army has placed the units on prepare to deploy orders in case violence in the northern state escalates. European Union and Mercosur leaders have signed the landmark free trade agreement in Paraguay after 25 years of negotiations, paving the way for what would become the European Union's largest ever trade deal. The accord covers the European Union with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay, but still requires approval from the European Parliament. Syria's Communications Minister Abdul Salman Haikal said internet users can now access the Google Play Store without a VPN and that most Google services are expected to return to Syria soon. The restoration follows the removal of Syria from US Treasury's off-act sanctions list last year. Viewers, we now start with news on the Gaza Peace Board. Jordan, Pakistan and Hungary have received invitations from US President Donald Trump to join his board of Peace for Gaza. Jordan's King Abdullah is reviewing the details of his invitation, while Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has said he'll engage in international efforts for peace in Gaza. Hungary, on the other hand, has accepted the invitation, with Prime Minister Viktor Orban expressing his honor in joining the initiative. The Board of Peace aims to oversee Gaza's temporary governance and support its reconstruction after the conflict. Composed of world leaders and diplomats, it will focus on establishing stability and working toward a long-term peaceful resolution. Key members include US President Donald Trump, former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, UK Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and US Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law, is also part of the board, along with billionaire Mark Rowan and World Bank President Ajay Banga. Additional members will be announced in the coming weeks. Retired Major General Sudhakarji, who is a senior strategic and international affairs expert, now joins me in this discussion. Sudhakarji, thank you very much for joining us here. Firstly, what's your opinion of the members of the Gaza Peace Board? There's no woman, there's no Palestinian. It's also triggered a clash between Netanyahu and Donald Trump himself. Then there are more contentions as far as the $1 billion fund to retain a 3-year membership is concerned. Do talk about all these points and contentions that are being put forward.
Kriti, good evening. Thank you for inviting me for your show. in short, very cryptic response to your question, which is though short but has got a long preamble. I would say it is highly contentious. It is fraught with dangers of potential to open into future conflicts, because the intention behind this peace board or board of peace seems to be very fallacious and has got objective with hidden agenda. When I say this, what I mean is, if the agenda was universal in keeping with the sequence of event related to Israel and Palestine, then perhaps uh, in the mandate or in the scope of peace proposal, the two nation theory would have been loud and clear, which is not the case. But I am glad that the King of Jordan, who is a very, very profound and ardent supporter of two nation theory, leadership of his caliber and stature have been shortlisted. He will do good. Pakistan willy-nilly is a shifting kind of a partner. Wherever it suits them, they change their color and side. So most untrusted and cannot be relied upon, although they are also in favor of two nation theory. Similarly, Hungary that you spoke of, um, to large an extent, I personally feel that the leadership is in favor of two nation theory, and it will go a long way, because people don't read history, so therefore I don't want to take their mind back to the historical perspective of the creation of Israel out of Palestinian or Arab land. At some point in time in Cold War 1.0, it had a dominant influence. That is, I'm talking about the Eastern Bloc of communism had a dominant influence and impact on this particular stretch of land, as also Iraq, the Baath Party that we often talk of, was nothing but as an extension of the communism. And so much so, even in Yemen, a long period also was under the influence of communism. Without going too much deep into it, the fact of the matter is, something is better than nothing. Some humble beginning has been made. My only fear is that bigger the group, further is the delay. And farthest will go away from any lasting and kind of a sustainable peace and normalcy in this region. Notwithstanding what we discussed today, you have already alluded to Netanyahu having very serious contentions with regard to the members of the Board of Peace, as also the parameters in the Board of Peace, one. Number two, the way it is being contemplated to handle the Hamas, the disarmament of Hamas. Although Hamas has clearly indicated that they are prepared to actually disarm, I doubt, having seen insurgency and terrorism very closely overseas, people do promise under duress and pressure, like Donald Trump like leadership, but before the ink dries up on the paper, they switch back to their arms and weapons and back to the violent activities. It's a very tall order, very premature to say, but let's keep fingers crossed. It's going in for a very noble objective. If it happens, nothing to stop giving kudos to Donald Trump at the end of the day. Back to you, Kriti.
All right, sure. Thanks very much, Sudhakarji, for your assessment of the situation for our viewers here. I request you to stay on as we proceed. Viewers, Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has sent a clear message now to Russian President Vladimir Putin. She has emphasized that Japan values its relationship with Russia and seeks a swift ceasefire in Ukraine. The message was conveyed through Japanese lawmaker who met with Takaichi and Foreign Minister before traveling to Moscow. Suzuki, during his meeting with Konstantin Kosachev, the deputy chairman of Russia's Federation Council on December 26, passed on Takaichi's statements. Takaichi's message signals Japan's hopes for a peaceful resolution, showing that Tokyo is keen on contributing to peace efforts in Ukraine while maintaining diplomatic ties with Moscow. Retired Major General Sudhakar ji continues to stay with us. General Sudhakar, what do you think has prompted this statement from Takaichi? So far, nothing of the sort had come out. But now, while she wants to maintain ties with Russia as they are. She's also spoken on peace for Ukraine and in Ukraine. How do you see the timing of her statements, and what do you think has really propelled her to say this?
In short, let me give you very quick reflections. First and foremost, the center of gravity of the behavioral change of geopolitics of the world order is being driven by the transactional, unpredictable behavior of Donald Trump as on today. When I say that, what I mean is that the same Western alliance, which was led by USA at one point in time during Biden's era, they used to be hell for leather against Putin. But today, driven by Donald Trump, there is always, peacenik signatures being offered, and it is coming out prominently in as important a document as that of National Security Strategy of USA 2025, wherein USA has made very pointed indication to Russia that Russia is a member of the peer group, not an adversary. One. Number two, they have also indicated that its status of G8 membership will be restored. Number three, Russia is going to be integrated with the ecosystem of the existing geopolitical order along with the leading economies. It means very substantive, kind of out of proportion departure from the traditional standpoint and the stance of USA or the Western alliance led by USA. Not that I am saying the European countries are in favor of this, but this is the Donald Trump who is driving everything. So with its changed stance and also the changed affiliation with China, simply because of the economics, I am saying, because the geopolitics has been overtaken by geoeconomics. That soybean that we talk of and the corn in the central corridor of America, which was actually, rotting because the farmers almost went in for up in arms against Donald Trump, almost. Not that they really went against him, because that is the corridor of Republican. So Donald Trump, somehow or the other, he managed to negotiate with China, took a commitment, and China, instead of buying soybean and corn from Brazil, has switched its commitment to America and promised to buy $12 billion or more in a year from America, from this particular stretch of the corridor, buying soybean and corn. That apart, the rare earth element also has been weaponized by China. Therefore, America is going very slow. While it is singled out India for buying oil from Russia, it has not done anything against China, because the leverages are in favor of China. Because of these changing dynamics, Japan is also playing around with the words, has started showing signatures of proximal affinity towards Japan. When I say proximal affinity to Japan, it is not overshadowed by strategic altruism. It is overshadowed by the past historical precedents. Historical precedents, take your mind back to the Kuril Island. Because of short of time, I'll just keep it as short as possible. There is an area of dispute. The Kuril Island continues to be under the occupation of Russia, and they had annexed it immediately after the Second World War. They have had an agreement on joint declaration in 1956. 1978, Japan and China, they went in for a treaty that actually gave red herrings to the relationship between Moscow and Tokyo. Subsequently, the treaty with the USA gave a complete departure and changed the dynamics in East Japan Sea as also South China Sea. And now lately, although Russia or the Moscow had given a clear indication in the past that out of 4 islands, 2 small islands, namely Shikotou and Habumai, would be handed over to Japan at some point in time. But because of changing stance of Japan, because of Japan's sanction against Russia for having invaded into Ukraine, also because of other impositions of restrictions against Russia, there has been a kind of a stalemate between two countries. And now this late signature, it indicates that possibly a thaw is in the making, and that thaw will change the dynamics and the geopolitical order towards the East China Sea, as also the Sea of Japan and the South China Sea. The relationship between Japan and Russia changing, it will also contribute towards change in dynamics of the world order, because Japan also is not a small power. It is one of the biggest economies in the world as on today, although overtaken by India. It is a technological prowess in the world. So keeping all this in mind, it has got huge leverage. Maybe things will change for good, maybe for bad. One, it is too premature to actually speculate anything, but at the moment, it is giving a very positive signature of some kind of a reconciliation between Tokyo and Moscow in times ahead. Back to you, Kriti.
All right, Sean. Thank you, Sudhakarji, very much for your assessment of the situation here for our viewers. And we move ahead now. The Pentagon has placed about 1,500 active duty US soldiers on prepare to deploy orders amid escalating protests in Minnesota linked to the government's deportation drive. US media report the move is precautionary as tension rises in Minneapolis following confrontations between residents and federal immigration officers. The White House says it is standard for the Pentagon to be ready for any presidential decision. President Trump has warned he could invoke the Insurrection Act if state officials fail to stop protesters from targeting ICE agents. The troops identified for possible deployment are trained in cold weather operations and are based in Alaska. Minnesota's governor has already mobilized the state's National Guard. Local leaders accuse the president of federal overreach, as Washington argues the measures are needed to protect federal personnel and property. Andrew Latham, who is international affairs expert from Minneapolis, joins me in this discussion. Andrew, why do you think Trump is ordering the troop deployment on standby as of now? What really has triggered him?
Well, it's important to recognize, as you just did, that these troops are being put on standby. The Insurrection Act has not yet been invoked, and so these federal troops would have no authority. But they're getting ready, both on the legal side, the administration is getting ready, and on the practical military side, they're getting ready as well. Why now? Well, there's a growing sense of frustration on the part of all parties. The people of this state, Minnesota, are not happy with this federal immigration surge, and the state government is responding as you might expect. It is channeling that frustration, and there is a tension between the federal immigration enforcement efforts and the state efforts to look after the interests of the population of the state, let's put it that way. And so I think Trump is getting frustrated now, and he's signaling the way he often does, that I'm going to escalate, I'm going to ramp things up if I don't get my way. And it remains to be seen if he will get his way, and if not, if he will actually invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy the 101st Airborne Division, which is a combat division, to Minnesota.
All right, sure. Andrew, stay on with us. In fact, we have some posts that have also been shared by Donald Trump on his Truth Social. Now, Trump has defended his immigration enforcement in Minnesota, saying ICE is removing some of the most violent criminals from the country and returning them home where they belong. Trump made these comments on his Truth Social platform, where he questioned why Minnesota leaders are resisting, accusing protesters of being professional agitators. He also tagged state officials, claiming they are diverting attention from fraud issues. The president insisted his administration is on the case, framing the operation as a public safety priority amid ongoing protests. Donald Trump's post on your screens, viewers, I like to quote it: ICE is removing some of the most violent criminals in the world from our country and bringing them back home where they belong. Why is Minnesota fighting this? Do they really want murderers and drug dealers to be ensconced in their community? The thugs that are protesting include many highly paid professional agitators and anarchists. Is this really what Minnesota wants? The crooked governor and Congresswoman Omar, who married her brother, don't mind, because it keeps the focus on attention of the $18 billion plus fraud that has taken place in the state. Don't worry, we're on it. All right, I invite Andrew to join me back here. Andrew, what do you think? Who do you think Trump is referring to? What is this fraud about? Why target Omar once again? And who are these paid professional agitators?
Well, he's referring to a scandal in the state of Minnesota involving, during the COVID era, large amounts of federal funds to fund daycare centers and things like that. And there was a great deal of fraud, some of it associated with the Somali migrant community. And Ilhan Omar comes out of that community. And so that's got everything on Trump's radar. Now, Trump may be right on the margins, but the perception here in this state is that this is a massive overreaction. It's racialized, it's targeting the Somali community and other people of color, that it is terrorizing. These ICE agents are going into elementary schools looking for children of undocumented migrants, people in higher education who are here legitimately on study visas are scared to leave their apartments. This is being perceived on the grassroots level in the state of Minnesota as massive overreaction, as a surge which is terrorizing the local population. So if there are some benefits on the margins, they are on the margins. The big impact, and this is being expressed by the mayor of Minneapolis, Fry, and by the state's governor, Walz, this is too much. This is overkill, and it needs to be dialed down. Donald Trump, of course, has come to the opposite conclusion. He thinks this is somehow working, and he wants to dial it up. And if the state authorities cannot provide adequate protection in his mind for these immigration agents, he'll use the 101st Airborne to make sure that they can do their job. So we have here a real sort of a classical clash between federal authority and state authority, federal overreach, in my judgment at this point, and the reaction of the people of the state of Minnesota. And then, of course, there's a racial dimension. This is America. There's a racial dimension layered on top of that as well. All of this makes for a toxic brew, which we are enduring at the moment. And as his habit, the president is not dialing things down. He's dialing the tension up.
All right. How do you think this is going to weigh in on the upcoming midterms?
Well, Minnesota is a fairly safe democratic state, so that's not going to change. This is going to become an even more democratic state. It depends on how people across the country are viewing this. I mean, Minnesota has taken the brunt of this surge in immigration enforcement. The Minneapolis operation was the largest in ICE's history, for example. It depends on how this effort touches down in other states. It depends on how his base reacts to this somewhat favorably, I think, if news reports can be trusted on this. It depends on how the undecideds are looking at this, and they're not looking at it very favorably. And then you need to put that in the context of the economy and his foreign policy vis-a-vis Greenland and Venezuela and perhaps Iran. And you put all of that together, and things are not looking good for the Republicans at the midterm, despite what Donald Trump thinks are his efforts to reverse that by appearing strong on the international stage, by appearing strong in terms of enforcing domestic law, immigration law. His efforts seem to be backfiring. It's sometime yet to the midterms. Things may change, but right now, if they were held today, the Republicans, I think, would suffer a resounding loss, and that would redound to the disadvantage of this president, even though he can't run again in the future.
Andrew, thanks very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Moving ahead, viewers, Libya's central bank has devalued the dinar by nearly 15%, setting a new exchange rate of about 6.38 dinars to the US dollar. This is the second devaluation in less than a year and reflects deepening political and economic strain in the country. Officials blame ongoing political divisions following falling oil revenues due to lower global prices and rising public spending without a unified national budget. Libya's economy depends heavily on oil, and fluctuations in production and prices continue to hit state finances hard. The move comes against the backdrop of years of instability following the 2011 uprising and the split between rival Eastern and Western governments. For ordinary Libyans, the weaker dinar is expected to drive up prices and worsen cost of living pressures. And we wrap up with some technology news. The Ugandan Communication has stated that the internet is restored in Uganda after a 4-day shutdown imposed by the government to limit communication during elections. George Nyombi Tembo, the UCC's executive director, has said that the brief suspension of public internet was a necessary and proportionate step taken on the strong recommendation of the Intelligence Institution Committee to safeguard the public order.
I'm pleased to announce that following the successful conclusion of the 2026 general elections and a careful assessment by the Interagency Security Committee, the Uganda Communication Commission has directed the immediate restoration of public internet access across the country, effective 18th January 20.
All right, viewers, that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching and staying tuned to NewsX World for all international news and updates.